Okay, my name is Catherine Hamilton. I'm the Wellhead Protection Coordinator for MassDEP's Drinking Water Program. I've been in this position for over 20 years, and I work on a variety of wellhead protection topics. The work that I do includes assisting public water suppliers in addressing land use threats in wellhead protection areas, reviewing municipal protection controls for compliance with the wellhead protection regulations, providing guidance on wellhead protection plans, and reviewing land acquisition grant applications. I also respond to the questions and concerns from other government agencies, consultants, and residents. And so this presentation today is going to be a brief look at how boards of health can help with protecting public drinking water wells. So I guess now I share my screen. Share, that's what I have to do, sorry. Let me see. Okay, oh, wait a minute. Can I stop my video? Yeah. Share. And slideshow. Sorry, just give me a minute.
Far left from the beginning.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Okay. So, so this is a presentation on how boards of health can help in protecting public water supply wells. So I got to go. Okay, so there are 4 very effective ways in which boards of health can assist DEP in this effort. These include being familiar with the wellhead protection areas, filling in wellhead protection gaps, using permits and inspections to play an important role, and how making small changes in communication can help. Many Board of Health members are already familiar with the wellhead protection recharge areas, but for those who might not be, this is a brief look at what these are. So DEP divides the wellhead protection areas into varying degrees of protection. The Zone 1 is the land area around a wellhead. For wells that withdraw less than 100,000 gallons per day, the radius of a Zone 1 is determined by the well's pumping rate. This area can encompass between 3 to 11 acres. For wells withdrawing more than 100,000 gallons per day, the Zone 1 is a 400-foot radius encompassing about 11 acres. For new wells, the Zone 1 must be owned or controlled by the water supplier, and activities must be limited to water supply operations. The Zone 2 is the recharge area for wells that pump over 100,000 gallons per day. These boundaries are determined by hydrogeological study and represent the furthest point from which water is drawn into a well. Wells with Zone 2s usually serve municipalities such as those operated by water departments and water districts. The Zone 2 of municipal wells must be protected by municipal bylaws, ordinances, or health regulations. The Interim Wellhead Protection Area, or IWPA, applies to all wells that pump less than 100,000 gallons per day. The radius of an IWPA is based on the well's pumping rate. The area of an IWPA can encompass as little as 6 acres to as many as 500 acres. Municipalities are not required to protect IWPAs. As we see here, both Berkshire and Franklin counties have many IWPAs. The majority of wells with IWPAs are non-community public water systems. Non-community water systems are classified as either non-transient non-community or transient non-community. A non-transient, non-community water system, or NTNC, serves 25 or more of the same people more than 4 hours a day. Typically, these are schools and workplaces. Transient non-community systems, or TNCs, serve a transient population, such as those visiting motels, campgrounds, restaurants, small stores, community centers, ski resorts, donut shops, and gas stations. So, to protect water quality, the Drinking Water Program implements a clean water multi-barrier approach that encompasses all aspects of water supply operations. In addition, public water supplies are protected by various state programs that include drinking water in their regulations. However, even with all of these measures in place, there are still gaps in wellhead protection. The Drinking Water Program believes that these gaps could be minimized with the assistance of boards of health. The first gap in wellhead protection is the Zone 1. Because activities here pose the greatest threat to water quality, water suppliers must own or control the land. However, in Massachusetts, there are many wells that exist prior to DEP regulations. As a result, there are wells in which the Zone 1 land is privately owned, or in some cases, the water system facility is located in the Zone 1. Water suppliers that do not currently own their entire Zone 1 are still subject to acquiring the land should it become available. A Board of Health regulation prohibiting new and expanded uses in Zone 1 could assist with this Zone 1 requirement. Water suppliers located in their Zone 1 should not be storing or using hazardous materials. All hazardous materials, including equipment that uses gasoline, should be relocated to outside the Zone 1 and stored properly. If such items cannot be relocated, storage should include a contained area on an impervious surface. A Board of Health regulation restricting hazardous materials use and storage in the Zone 1 will significantly help in closing this gap in protection. The next gap in protection is with Zone 2s. As mentioned, a Zone 2 for municipal wells must be protected by local controls that prohibit the uses and activities cited in the wellhead protection regulations. Most municipalities protect their Zone 2s through zoning, such as with an Aquifer Protection District bylaw. But because zoning only addresses future uses, existing uses that may be posing a threat to water quality remain unaffected. Boards of health can fill this gap by regulating existing potential threats. Of particular concern are threats posed by the improper storage of hazardous materials, de-icing chemicals, animal manure, and fertilizers. Because the use and storage of these materials is common to many land uses, the adoption of a Board of Health regulation requiring storage to comply with the criteria in the wellhead protection regulations will help to improve protection of the Zone 2. Another wellhead protection gap for Zone 2s applies to non-municipal wells, such as those of a water district, or when a Zone 2 extends into a neighboring community. In both of these instances, the water supplier must request the municipality to protect their Zone 2, and while many municipalities do provide protection, they are not required to do so. As a result, there are still Zone 2s not fully protected. Boards of health can help close this gap in protection by adopting some or all of the prohibitions in the wellhead protection regulations for those Zone 2s not fully protected in their community. A third gap in wellhead protection concerns the IWPA. Municipalities are not required to protect IWPAs. Water suppliers must conduct annual inspections of their IWPA and provide public outreach to residents and businesses. Protection of the IWPA could be significantly improved through Board of Health regulations that require the proper management and storage of hazardous materials, fertilizers, animal manure, and de-icing chemicals. Boards of health can help protect drinking water quality through their permitting and inspection process by requiring applicants to provide public water system information. All public water systems must be registered with DEP. The Drinking Water Program issues water system certificates of registration. The certificate identifies the facility as an approved public water system. The certificate must be posted in an area of the facility accessible to public view. An unregistered facility providing water to the public poses a threat to public health and should be reported to the Drinking Waters Program. Okay. Another important informational document is the Water Quality Report, also known as a Consumer Confidence Report. This report demonstrates that the water system is conducting their required water quality testing and that they are providing this information to the public. As with the registration, this report must also be posted in a public viewing area of the facility. The last important document is the Annual Statistical Report, or the ASR. This report describes a water system's operations, such as water production, facility ownership, and certified operator. Here is an example of a few pages from an ASR. The ASR does not need to be posted in the facility, but it does need to be submitted to DEP every year. Many small water systems routinely forget about the ASR requirement. As a result, DEP staff spends a lot of time having to contact water suppliers. Boards of health can help water suppliers remember this annual requirement by identifying the ASR in a permit application. So the next two slides are examples of how language might be added to a permit application. Here is an example for a campground. The question on water supply is expanded to specifically identify if the facility is a public water system and if they have a current certificate of registration and water quality report, and if they have submitted their ASR. Facilities that cannot answer this or cannot produce their current documents should be referred to the drinking water program for assistance. And here is an example of how language might be included in a food establishment permit. Language is added so that the applicant must acknowledge if they are a public water system and have the required documents. By including water supply language in permits, it reminds facility owners to stay in compliance with DEP regulations. It also helps by ensuring that an unregistered facility or one with degraded water quality does not inadvertently provide water to the public. The last way that boards of health can help with public water supplies is through communication. As you know, the drinking water program's primary method of communicating with boards of health is via email. One of the problems that the drinking water program experiences are emails that bounce back due to changes in staff and board members. Every year we reach out to other groups such as MABH and DPH for an updated email list, but we still get bounce backs. If it is possible, having a standardized Board of Health email would be highly useful. This would be in addition to existing staff or board member emails. This would ensure that boards of health are receiving information the drinking water program is sending to them, even if a staff or board member's email bounces back. And some communities also have a generic municipal email address. If your community has one and it can be used for sending information to boards of health, please let us know and we will add this address to our list. So this is the end of this presentation on wellhead protection. Questions and concerns, please contact us. You can contact me directly. There's my email address. Yvette DePizer is the program director, and you can also email the program director email address too, or call us. So thank you.
So Catherine, if you could hang on in case anybody has questions.
Okay.
While people are thinking about questions, please put questions in the chat if you have any questions. Joe Cerruti will be speaking next about private wells. But I noticed that you said several times that the boards of health can have regulations that would be helpful for various things. Do you have model regulations as well as model permit applications that we could share with the participants today?
Well, yes. DEP has an entire groundwater Board of Health regulation, for instance, that would cover an entire zone too. It includes all the regulations that are in the wellhead protection regulations. So that would be that. Now, if a board were to want to maybe pick and choose a couple of regulations that they want to apply to maybe an IWPA, they probably wouldn't want to take all the ones from the wellhead protection regulations itself. They'd probably want to pick and choose. So we do have a handout for that as well. It's a handout with all the regulations in it, but it's an easier one to read and to choose from. And I can certainly help anyone who calls and provide them with information.
Okay, great. We do have one question where she's asking if you can get copies of the forms, and also asking where can we find the translation of all the acronyms.
Oh my gosh, did I use the acronyms and I didn't explain anything?
I think you just went fast, so I think for somebody who wasn't familiar with the acronym,
Oh,
it was sometimes
oh,
harder. It's
oh,
fine. We're gonna
I'm
share. I know Joe was gonna put together some materials for after this was done. But is there
okay.
a place on the web or is there a place on your website where people can go to find
The
some of the
acronyms,
information?
I'll have to look through and see which acronyms I used. I mean, I think I used DWP for drinking water program and so I have to look, but I don't know if we have an actual page with acronyms, but I can certainly provide that information if somebody just wants to email me or call, they can do that too.
Why don't you give everybody your email address again?
Okay,
Or is it up there?
it's up on the screen. Am I still
Oh, okay.
sharing? I don't know.
Yes, you are.
So yeah, so that's my very long email address. I'm sorry it's so long, but it's Catherine-Sarafinis-Hamilton@mass.gov drinking water program. And this is the phone number that's up there is the office phone number. But if somebody wants to just call me, I didn't want to post my number on the presentation, but somebody, if anyone here wants to call me on my cell, they can. It's 617-571-1345. And I would be happy to talk to anyone who has questions.
Great. We have one more question that came in. If they want to send, what's the proper email for you to use to contact the Board of Health? Who do they send that to? Should they send that to you?
Oh, yes, please. Yes. Yes, because I will make sure it gets to where we have somebody at DEP and we have somebody in the drinking water program who has put together a list, which, as I said, has to get updated routinely. But yes, you can send anything to me and I'll make sure it goes where it needs to go.
Okay,
I'll
great.
just
And
I'll
then,
just add if people lose track of Catherine's email address, you can also send those requests to the program director email address, which I think can easily be found on our website.
I posted it.
And
Is
it's
no
up on
one?
the screen.
Yeah, it's up on the screen. Is it not? Okay. Yeah.
no, it's showing. It's showing.
Okay, good.
One more question.
Yeah.
They're coming in now. So it says, how does the Board of Health protect citizens getting non-potable water through a private water supplier?
So it would be a private water supplier. It would be somebody that's not a public water system. Is that what she's saying? That I'm
Uh,
not.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Chang, I think that's outside kind of the scope of this particular presentation, but I'm
Yeah, that
sure.
would be strictly a Board of Health. Yeah, that would be somebody who's not even a TNC. That would be the next step down. So that would yeah, that wouldn't be something we would even address.
Great.
But I have to think about it, to be honest with you. So I can, there probably is something, but I'd have to
He's
think about
asking what
that.
a TMC is.
A transient non-community, I think I was speaking too fast. Okay, I'm sorry. A TNC is a transient non-community water system. And it has to do with how many people they serve water to. And their transient population, for instance, like the campgrounds and the little ice cream shops and the gas stations and the Dunkin' Donuts, those are all, if they have their own drinking water source, their own well, they're they're TNC, transient non-community water system. So they're non-community because they're non-community, and then they're transient because the people are passing through.
Okay, thank you. Joe, why don't you put on your camera, and Catherine, if you stop sharing, then I think Joe can share
Okay.
his slides.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
So I'm Joe Cerruti with Mass DEP's drinking water program in the Boston office. The drinking water program appreciates this opportunity to present to you, and we thank Western Mass Public Health Association, Berkshire County Boards of Health Association for sponsoring this event. Special thanks to Laura Kitros for contacting us to request this presentation. And a thank you to all the other entities and individuals who worked to promote this workshop, and everyone who assisted in working out the logistics to make it happen. We're kind of tight on staffing resources at DEP, so all of that assistance is greatly appreciated. And my slide should be coming up. Here we go. Come on, there it is. I won't name all of the job duties assigned to me, but I will mention that I'm a hydrogeologist who's been with the drinking water program for nearly a quarter of a century. I'm coordinator of the Underground Injection Control Registrations Program. That deals with kind of the more benign types of wastewater discharges that would not require a groundwater discharge permit. They include things like open loop geothermal wells, stormwater discharges, and quite a few other types of discharges. I am one of the instructors for the soil evaluator training courses offered twice per year through the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission. And I'm the lead person in the drinking water program Boston office for dealing with private well issues. So the topics I'm going to cover today: who regulates private wells in Massachusetts? And are there any regulations for private well water quality standards? What private well resources are provided by MassDEP's drinking water program? So the simple answer to who regulates private wells in Massachusetts is the local boards of health. That authority is generally conveyed to the boards of health through Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 31, and Sections 122 and 122A. Section 31 states specifically, and I quote, "Boards of health may make reasonable health regulations," end quote. And this provides fairly wide-ranging authority to regulate anything related to protection of health, and that would presumably include the regulation of private wells. Section 122A specifically references drinking water supplies and the Board of Health's authority to issue orders to remedy any situation where the water is considered unsafe or is of inadequate supply. At the state level, the only regulation that really directly relates to private well regulation would be the MassDEP well driller regulations at 310 CMR 46. And those regulations require that all wells be installed by a MassDEP certified well driller. And those regulations also require well completion report submittals to MassDEP and to the local Board of Health. While I'm on that subject, I will let you know that there have been draft regulations that have languished for quite some time, but at some point in the future, those MassDEP well driller regulations will probably be significantly enhanced to include quite a bit more details regarding well construction requirements. Right now, it's really just focused on, what the qualifications are needed to be certified, and just the basic requirement to submit those well completion reports. So, are there any state regulations specifically for water quality standards? So not, drilling down to the more specific question of private well water quality, as opposed to all the different things that could be involved in the regulation of a private well. For instance, the well construction requirements, casing seals, and things like that. At the water quality standard, the answer is the same. It's basically only those standards that may be established by the local Board of Health. The MassDEP drinking water program, we certainly recommend the local use of public drinking water standards, but there is no state requirement that dictates to any of the 351 individual municipality, the boards of health in those municipalities, that they adopt any specific drinking water regulations. Now, I'm going to dive a little bit into more detail on one contaminant in particular, just because it's a relatively recent one. And a lot of you were involved in meetings I attended, the kickoff meetings for the free PFAS testing in private wells. So I'm going to go into a little more detail on that because it's a new contaminant. A lot of people probably don't know a lot about it. The MassDEP, there is no federal drinking water standard that's regulatorily required for public water systems. However, MassDEP, I believe a couple of years back, did establish a drinking water standards for 6 of the thousands of PFAS chemicals that exist. And that standard for the 6 PFAS chemicals combined is 20 parts per trillion, or 20 nanograms per liter. More recently, the EPA issued a new health advisory. They had a previous, I believe it was a health advisory with recommended limits of 70 parts per trillion for both PFOA and Pfas, 2 of those PFAS chemicals. And they have recently lowered both of those to essentially 0 parts per trillion. And they added a couple of additional PFAS chemicals. The one with the strictest limit that they added is what is called, referred to as Gen X chemicals. And they set a limit of 10 parts per trillion for those. The good news about the Gen X chemicals is that even though it's not part of the PFAS 6 PFAS chemicals that we regulate for public water systems, the results of those Gen X chemicals do show up on the water quality results that are sent in for the public water systems, and it was also included in the sample results that were issued to the private well owners that participated in that free PFAS testing program. Again, there are no state or federal requirements that would establish any drinking water limit for a private well. It is totally up to the local boards of health on that. Let's see, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything on this one. Oh, I will mention, so at MassDEP, if the EPA, it's issued a health advisory, the public water systems are not currently required to meet those standards. They are working on developing a public drinking water standard, and that may come out at the end of the year, beginning of next year. And certainly if they lower the federal standard, MassDEP will be required to update our public drinking water regulations to lower that standard. And also MassDEP's internal Office of Research and Standards, they're the ones that developed this current PFAS 6 standard of 20 part per trillion for public water systems. They are constantly reviewing new health information as it becomes available. And it's also possible that on their own, our Office of Research and Standards may also determine at some point that either they need to lower the 20 part per trillion, or quite possibly add additional PFAS chemicals such as the Gen X chemicals that the EPA added to their health advisory list. And I do want to also mention the good news about those Gen X chemicals is that for all of the public water supply testing that we've done, and I'm pretty sure for what's been reviewed for the private well results, we pretty routinely, well, it's not that uncommon to see exceedances of PFAS 6 limit. However, I don't believe we've seen any situation yet where the Gen X chemicals have exceeded that health advisory limit of 10 parts per trillion. So hopefully this is not going to become a new problem. I mean, we've got problems enough with the PFAS 6 chemicals. Let's see. All right. The health effects of PFAS 6. Currently known health effects include developmental effects in fetuses and infants, effects on the thyroid, liver, kidneys, certain hormones, and the immune system. Some studies suggest that there may be a cancer risk in people exposed to higher levels of some PFAS chemicals. But I do want to emphasize here, this contaminant is relatively recently regulated by MassDEP. It's not yet regulated, even though there's a health advisory by EPA. And, we should all expect that additional information will be coming out on the health effects, and don't be surprised if some effects do get added to the currently known list. The free private well sampling effort that ended June 30th of 2022, we ran samples for 1,688 individual private wells. Approximately 5% of those, so essentially 1 out of 20 private wells tested, exceeded the current MassDEP public drinking water limit of 20 parts per trillion. And given that prevalence, MassDEP Drinking Water Program and the Massachusetts PFAS Interagency Task Force, in their final report, recommend that all private wells be tested for PFAS contamination. Treatment options. The treatment device should be NSF approved, and that stands for National Science Foundation. But if you do a Google search on NSF, it's just automatically going to come up. NSF approved to remove PFAS and PFOA. So the National Science Foundation has only tested products for the previous EPA health recommendation advisory limit of 70 parts per trillion for PFAS and 70 parts per trillion for PFOA. So unfortunately, their approvals did not test to see whether those devices would get down below 20 parts per trillion for the PFAS 6 chemicals that we regulate in Massachusetts. However, the good news is that what we have discovered, especially in for our Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, where they have required treatment at down gradient private wells from known oil hazardous material release sites, where they have installed treatment systems, they have generally found that the post-treatment results are non-detect for all of the PFAS 6 chemicals. And that's actually also good news if that 20 part per trillion limit comes down. Hopefully all of the existing systems that are out there treating for PFAS 6 chemicals will continue to work even to more stringent standards. For most households, a point of use system will be sufficiently protective of human health. The big caveat to that is, if there's any concern that one or more individuals in that household either can't understand the importance of only drinking from treated taps, and I should have mentioned point of use would be something like a system that's installed just to treat water going to the kitchen tap. If one or more household members doesn't understand that they should only be collecting cooking and drinking water from that tap, or can't be prevented from drawing water from the untreated taps, that would be certainly an instance where one would want to consider installing a point of entry system, essentially a whole house treatment system. The granular activated carbon is currently the best available treatment technology, and it's not as complicated as the anion exchange technology that is essentially, I believe, only being used in some of our larger municipal public water treatment systems. Those tend to be a lot more complicated to run, and you really do need qualified water treatment operators to efficiently operate those systems. And also, I will mention that we currently, so MassDEP does not regulate treatment of private wells. We did hire UMass to conduct a study using basically currently available over-the-counter point-of-use PFAS removal products. I think it's all granular activated carbon systems that have received the National Science Foundation, the NSF approval for PFAS treatment. And Catherine had mentioned the importance of being on our email list. All of you who receive emails from all of our Board of Health email blasts. You will certainly receive an email from us when those results are available. And also from my previous slide on the results of the private well testing program, UMass is finalizing their report on that. And you will also receive an email notification when that report is available for review. Treatment costs. I need to give a disclaimer on this. So again, the MassDEP drinking water program, we do not regulate private drinking water systems. We do not regulate the vendors that sell to those private entities. And this information, the information on this slide came from two contacts that I have. One works for a company that's contracted to provide point of entry whole house treatment at private wells that are impacted by a Bureau of Waste Site cleanup site that has a release tracking number. And the other is an entity who is hired directly by private well owners to install point of entry systems. I don't have point of use cost estimates because neither of my contacts install point of use. For the point of entry, the whole house system, if it's one vessel containing the GAC stands for granular activated carbon. One vessel would generally go for, the install would be $2,500 to $3,000. If you put two vessels in series, more like $4,000 to $5,000 to install. Situations where you might want to consider the two vessels in series would be when you're way over the treatment standard, especially if you're above the immediate health standard of 90 parts per trillion. And the cost, I've been told, to send the spent media to one of the facilities that I think there's about maybe 20 facilities throughout the states that can regenerate that that filter media. It's about $350 per vessel full. Now to switch topics. I'm going to discuss the private well resources that are provided by MassDEP drinking water program. We have our private well guidelines. We have model board of health regulations. We have 5 different private well form templates specifically for consideration of use by local boards of health. We have multiple private well fact sheets that are useful to both the private well owner as well as local health agents. And then we also, MassDEP developed Massachusetts specific content for an online web application called Be Well Informed. And I'm going to go through that in more detail in a future slide. The private well guidelines, that is a 136-page document. It's fairly comprehensive document that provides recommendations regarding well construction and well decommissioning, well abandonment, well development, water quality and quantity testing, minimum well yield, the volumetric yield based on number of bathrooms and bedrooms in a home, well disinfection methods, and water treatment. We also offer Board of Health regulations, and those were last updated in 2018 to reflect changes in our private well guidelines. The Model Board of Health regulations are not 136 pages. They're significantly shorter, but they essentially would make local requirements, should you choose to do so, of some of the private well guidelines. And again, very important to let you all know, there's no state requirement to adopt any of the model health regulations. I know that some entities take those model board of health regulations and add, subtract, edit. You might find it as a useful template to start your process, but you certainly can craft your own. Let's see, make sure I didn't skip anything on that. Oh, yeah, do that on the next slide. We have private well form templates, and this is specifically for use by local boards of health, should you choose to do so. They were Developed also, I believe, in 2018 and designed to match the Model Board of Health regulations for private wells, as well as changes that we made to the Privatewell Guidelines. There's no regulatory requirement to use them. And you can find them on our main private well webpage that the drinking water program manages. And as was mentioned earlier, I'm going to put together a PDF document that's got all of the web links that I'm going to be going through today, so you don't have to frantically scribble things down. You'll get all that in an email from one of the people who helped to organize this presentation. The private well form templates, we've got one for a well construction permit application. I'm assuming most of you probably already have one of these. A pumping test report form, a water quality report form that can be sent in as a cover to a lab results, water supply certificate application, and a water supply certificate, and then a covenant to maintain water treatment unit, should you choose to want to make that a requirement. This is just a screenshot from the top of the well construction permit application form. Most of these templates are in Microsoft Word format, so that you can easily edit to make versions that are specific to your municipality. And they are the ones that are fillable forms, the ones that require a lot of data entry, that they generally have fillable data entry fields, so you don't have to figure out how to format that. We also provide on that main private well web page several private well fact sheets, including what we at MassDEP Drinking Water Program recommend for water quality testing in private wells. Again, there's no regulatory requirements to do any of that testing. There are fact sheets on arsenic, radiologicals, and the Pfas chemicals. I forgot to mention, and I'll say it very slowly so I don't tip over my tongue. Pfas stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. See, I tripped on my tongue anyway. Another fact sheet on what to do if your well is flooded, and then another one for droughts. Essentially, your well dries up during a drought. And then another one on point of use and point of entry. And I'm sorry I messed up the abbreviations on POE in my placement. Treatment systems. And then the Be Well Informed tool, that is not hosted on DEP's website. It was hosted on an EPA website. Funding dried up for that. It is now being hosted by the Environmental Council of States. They graciously offered to host it on one of their web servers when EPA decided to drop it. It is a web-based tool for private well owners, but I will tell you that I use it, and other people in DEP who have even less knowledge than I do on private well treatment often use this tool when we receive inquiries from private well owners. It is set up so that you can enter your lab report results and receive information on whether you exceed a limit, a Massachusetts public drinking water limit, and you receive information on potential health concerns associated with the exceeding those limits and the various treatment options that are available. And again, that's going to be another link that that you'll be receiving in a subsequent email. So if you go to the bewellinformed.info website, this is what you will first see. You need to select from that the drop-down menu with the word select, and select Massachusetts. There are several entities that are participating in this tool. Select Massachusetts and you will see mass-specific content, including some contaminants, the ability to enter contaminants like Pfas, which you're not going to see on if you check off some of the other state and tribal entities that are participating in that tool. It will automatically open up to the data entry tab, where you can enter your results. You do not have to enter results for everything. If you only have one contaminant result, you can enter that and hit enter, and it will give you the information on what you on only those contaminants that you entered. So this is the top portion of that form, and this is the most of the rest of that form in terms of all the contaminants that are covered. And just so you're aware, under that last item there, non-regulated PFAS chemicals, the form actually, you can enter for all 6 PFAS chemicals that are regulated for public water systems. It's just the screenshot cut off the rest of those. Let's see. These are probably the most useful web pages in what you get sent later on. I'm going to be adding a couple of other ones, perhaps some from Catherine too. The main private well drinking water program managed web page is the top one. The second one is information that is aimed specifically at boards of health. I'm going to give you a warning here. I find that all of the information that I have discussed today is relatively easily found if you use the search engine that is in the states. If you're on any of the web pages in the MassDEP that MassDEP manages, the search engine will generally, if you type in what you're looking for, you'll generally find it. One bad exception that I find is this second link here to the Board of Health information. For some reason, our search engine is not bringing people there, and I got so frustrated that I finally did save it as a favorite in my browser, and I suggest you do the same. And if you're looking for, so the top one, private well information, does have a fact sheet pertaining specifically to PFAS as it relates to private wells, treatment information, and a lot of other information. If you're looking for general information on PFAS, that last link is MassDEP's main PFAS webpage, and that's not exclusively drinking water program content. That's going to include information from other bureaus and entities. And this is the generic contact information, the top one for the drinking water program, specifically the Boston office, and the main phone number for the drinking water program Boston office. And for private well and underground injection control registration questions, you can certainly contact me directly with the information provided here. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, we've got quite a few questions that have come in on the chat, so I'll start reading them off to you. So one question was, water quality is going to become a more important issue in the future. Withdrawal from a given aquifer by both municipal and private wells are not monitored along this parameter, except for large withdrawals, 100,000 GPD. What are your thoughts about the role of the boards of health in monitoring and/or regulating withdrawals? This is especially important for private wells, which are used for irrigation or industrial purposes.
Yeah, that's a great question. And some of our counterparts in some of the surrounding states regulate down below that 100,000 gallon per day threshold that MassDEP regulates to under the Water Management Act. I believe that it would be well within your regulatory authority to look at those issues. It certainly can be a problem. Every time we enter a new drought, we will often receive complaints of wells that have gone dry. Oftentimes it's in an area where they got through previous droughts, but in the previous droughts, there wasn't the big new development that's nearby. It would be difficult for MassDEP to regulate that down to significantly lower levels. And I guess I would I would suggest, it was mentioned in that chat, that I would suggest that you would focus on the larger withdrawals rather than trying to get down to the single family residential, with maybe an exception for if you've got a very large development of single family homes, especially if the lot sizes are relatively small. So next question.
Yep. So many well drillers don't work on shallow gravel wells or springs, especially for repairs. What do you suggest local boards of health do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's in the western part of the state, that certainly is going to be a problem. In the southeastern part of the state, in the Cape and the Islands, where the vast majority of wells are in the overburden formation, you're going to have plenty of entities that are quite familiar with working on shallower wells. I don't really have a good recommendation for you. There are, I think there's at least one entity that's at least in the Connecticut River Valley that would have some familiarity, but I'm hesitant to name names because at MassDEP, well, there's a state law that prohibits state employees from recommending individual contractors.
And then the same person asked if there is PFAS 6s in the local water supplies in Western Mass.
Yeah, so I mentioned that of the 1,688 wells, and those are wells from 85 different communities where a majority of the water supply is private water supply, and it obviously would have included a whole slew of towns out in western Massachusetts and west of the Connecticut River. And we were finding it out there. So one of the unfortunate things that was discovered is, we had no idea, and hopefully we'll have a lot better information for people when the UMass final report comes out. But we certainly did see it in locations where we might have expected to see it, where the well was in close proximity or down gradient from land use activities that are already known to be potential sources of PFAS. But I have to tell you that there were several locations where, you looked around and it was like really completely undeveloped area, nothing nearby, no known previous dumps from the 1950s or 60s. So you can't assume that PFAS 6 is only going to show up where you've got industrial activities or fire training activities or fire department locations where there might have been a release of some of the PFAS containing foams. And that is why the drinking water program and the Massachusetts multi-agency task force came up with a recommendation that really everybody should test for it. One of the unfortunate things that we might eventually find out is that some of this contamination, when you're down just a little above the 20 part per trillion level, not way up at the 90 part per trillion plus level, we may end up finding that some of this has been discharged to the local on-site Title V septic system, just because unfortunately the PFAS chemicals are and have been historically so prevalent in the items in individuals' homes. Next question.
Yeah. Is there a ballpark you can give for how long a GAC vessel will last? Does it entirely depend on the amount of PFAS being filtered?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my disclaimer is going to be, I'm a hydrogeologist. I'm not a water treatment expert. I know enough to be dangerous, and I know that it's very important that when somebody is considering installing a granular activated carbon unit to remove PFAS, you really need to make sure that you don't need some pre-treatment, from things as simple as sediment filters to possibly iron and manganese removal, because other contaminants and particles are certainly going to shorten the lifespan of that granular activated filter media, because it's just going to take up some of the available space for absorbing the PFAS chemical. This is coming from the back of my head, unfortunately. I haven't had recent conversations, but I believe our Bureau Waste Site Cleanup, I think they're finding that they're going for at least a year, maybe a couple of years. I don't think any of my contacts indicated that they're seeing situations where they're having to replace, like every few months. But the caveat to that is these people are all dealing with point of entry systems that have, a lot more granular activated carbon. Granted, they're also processing a lot more volume of water. The point of use systems, I really don't have contacts that are familiar with those. I am hoping that we will be able to give you will hopefully find a little bit better information on the point of use systems when that UMass study comes out.
And
Next
when is
question.
that study?
Yep.
When is that study expected out, Joe?
Yeah, good question. So the free PFAS testing program ended June of 2022, and that report should come out very soon on the free PFAS testing. The UMass study on the point of use systems, that's an ongoing project. I'm pretty sure that project is running to the end of this state fiscal year. So I think the study could run through June 30. So it may, and I'm getting the sense that the project's not going to wrap up early in that fiscal year. So my guess is going to be, it's going to be at the end of toward the June 2023, or maybe a few months after that.
Okay. All right. We've got two more questions. How to regulate or protect drinking water when road bridge borings done in a Zone 2 aquifer recharge protection area? Sorry. Did that make sense? Do you need me to read that again now that I've read it?
Yeah. So how to protect the public water systems when you're having drilling, blasting operations? Near public water supply wells?
It says how to regulate or protect drinking water when road bridge borings done in a Zone 2 aquifer recharge protection area. Fran, if you want to put some, if you're still here, if you want to put some clarification on that. Are you talking about public water supplies or?
And you can put additional info, but I can talk about, just in general, drilling operations. One of the explosives that I understand is sometimes used. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with like the proportion of sites that use one blasting agent versus another, but there's certainly, when MassDEP many years ago came up with a public drinking water standard for perchlorate, we did come across several. Certainly a lot was associated with public wells that were down gradient from areas where municipalities had done their fireworks displays. And there were at least a few, I think, where it was suspected that previous blasting operations had contributed to the perchlorate.
Yeah, you see that he clarified. Public water supply recharge area. Not sure if blasting involved in this case, just drill borings.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, there's a concern for the actual drilling itself in the Zone 2, because generally the drilling activities themselves are the drilling activities, especially bedrock drilling. The main issues that we see with that, the main complaints that we receive are typically coming from abutting properties or very nearby properties. And it has to do with the fact that the typical bedrock well is drilled with an air rotary rig. That is a very violent process in the subsurface. You are, you have a drill bit that is acting as a jackhammer, and at the same time you are injecting high pressure air to lift your drill cuttings and to develop your well, typically after you finish drilling. And that tends to push particulate matter out into the fractures, and often it results in colored water and sediment showing up in nearby wells. unless they're really close to the sources that are being protected by the zone 2, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to impact the public water supply well.
Great. And then the last question is, are there ways to test for glycophosphate and other types of fertilizers?
That's a good question. So it's going to take me too long to find my notes, but I will look for my notes. And if you want to email, if that person would email me directly, or give me a text message or a voice message, I can look that up. If others are interested, I'll copy you guys anyway, the people who helped organize this. And if others express an interest, you can forward that on.
I can give you the name of the person who asked.
Sure.
Or well, she says that she can send an email to you for an
great.
answer.
Thanks.
Perfect. All right, that's all the questions I see. Sandra says she is tested and it was very expensive. Yeah,
so because I have fielded private well questions since around 2006, we periodically get these questions for contaminants that are not where we don't require public water systems to test for them. Some of them have been pathogens, and you almost always can find some lab that will do it. Unfortunately, if they're not able to process a lot of those samples on any given day, they're going to charge a lot of money. And I recall a lot of homeowners, after I got back to them with information on labs where they could get that particular type of sample done, they write back to me and say, yeah, they said it would cost me $500. Just so everybody's aware, if you're getting these types of inquiries on pathogens, the standard recommendation, unless you want to spend a lot of money to test for your pathogen of concern, you're probably better off testing for what the public water supply systems test for. And if those results, for instance, if the total coliform result is non-detect, chances are pretty slim that you've got other contaminants that we're not testing for at public water systems. And that's not the case for the glyphosate. That's going to be a herbicide pesticide, so that's going to be a different issue.
Okay. Great. I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much. This has been great. Appreciate you doing this.
And thanks for everyone for attending. It was it's great to be able, I have very limited time resources, so it's fantastic that so many people signed up for this presentation. I really appreciate that.